Good Friday, everybody. This is Jason Bickle with Rapid Intake, and today we are going to do 5 easy and interactive navigational schemes for M-Learning. And I believe that you can see my screen. Can you raise your hand real quick just to make sure I can see? You guys can see my screen and you can hear me okay? Perfect. If you do have questions, you can put it in the question panel, and I'll look at that there. And so we'll take those as well. And let me just, before I get started, I have to announce today that if you are interested in mobile learning and you have the time, it's coming up in just a little over a week. We do have our M-Learning DevCon, which is October 3rd through the 5th in Philadelphia. And we've invited everybody we can, all tools, all vendors, to take part in that mobile event and to learn development strategy, et cetera. It really is the how-to mobile conference with 90-minute sessions and 3-hour how-to sessions. So take a look at that if you get a chance at mlearningdevcon.com. And I would love to see you in Philly if you can make it. Appreciate it. All right, that being said, let's go ahead and get started today. So 5 easy interactive navigational schemes for M-Learning. Well, first and foremost, just a little bit about me so you know who's talking to you today. Again, my name is Jason Bickle, and I've been in e-learning and multimedia, classroom training, development, etc., a professor of computer graphics, and a strategist for learning for about 15 years. And one of the things I always say is I'm working to build a stronger development community. Why bang your head against the monitor when I already have the lumps? So if you need anything, strategy, a little bit of tips and tricks here and there, let me know. I'll be happy to help you out, and we'll go from there. So today's agenda was pretty straightforward. I don't spend much time here, but engaging navigation and then again navigational schemes that you saw in the description, the linear model sequencing, thumb and video menus, scenarios, and external challenges, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. All right. So here's the interesting thing about mobile interactivity. I've been teaching Flash for 10 years, and actually this is the first fall in 8 years that I haven't taught Flash at the college level. And the interesting thing is I remember, I guess it was 3 years ago, maybe 2.5 years ago, that Steve Jobs came out and said they weren't going to support Flash Player. And that's just about the time we started talking about mobile, and all of a sudden, in the e-learning world, everything went a bit crazy because everything that we did, all of our tools, all of our development platforms, everything depended on Flash Player, with the exception of just a few, but even those had Flash outputs. And so the biggest thing with mobile is so many people are concerned, do I get mobile interactivity? Do I have those things? Or mobile engagement? And oftentimes people thought about engagement from a standpoint of being, well, I have to have animation, and I have to have audio, and I have to have those things. And yes, those are nice things to have, no doubt about it. But really what the question becomes, without Flash Player, and we're doing that, and we can do animation on the mobile side, and we can do those things, but the most important thing we need to know today is, what if there were no graphics, audio, or animation? Okay? If there were no graphics, audio, or animation, would they still learn? So we as instructional designers have to get out of our mode of depending on the graphics and animation tools and things. I still say we use them, and they're very important, but we have to think about other ways to engage the learner, and this is where these navigational schemes fit in. So would they still learn? And the answer is yes. Okay? The reason is that we as instructors, we as trainers, we as e-learning developers, mobile learning developers, need to create a need to know. And I really got this need to know, and some of you may have heard me talk about this before, but I got this need to know from my wife. She'll be watching television at night, and all of a sudden a movie will come up or an actor's name will come up, but she won't know the answer, and immediately she's on her phone or her iPad and she's off to the races looking that up on the internet. Obviously, and she can't sleep unless she does that. And so I snicker a bit, but what's interesting is that all of a sudden she has this need to know. And it doesn't matter if there are graphics or animations. She's off to the races and driving that. So although today, the primary part of today's presentation is about navigational strategies, the biggest piece is creating that need to know, and we're going to talk about that for just a moment. So let's look at the definition of need really defined here. A need is a necessary duty or obligation, so you must go do it, you've been ordered to do it. A lack of something required, desirable or useful. Now look at that second definition. This is very important to us because what we're trying to do with mobile learning is generally, yes, knowledge application, but really performance improvement most of the time. So if we're looking at that coaching piece, how do we improve performance, then we look for those lacks of something required. But here's the interesting thing. Do you have to define what's lacking, or can the learner define what's lacking? When my wife goes out to look for a movie or an actor's name or something like that, she's defined what she needs, and so she goes out and finds it. So somebody presented her with an opportunity, and then a need arose because of that. We also have the physiological or the psychological requirement for well-being, and I will even say that with my wife on the movie question, driving out on the mobile device to go find something, there is a psychological need. She can't sleep unless she does it. Okay? And then finally, a condition requiring supply or relief, and this is the anxiety that comes about from not knowing something. So somebody asks you a question, you don't know the answer, some anxiety comes up, so you're in a condition of supply or relief. So all of these things we can use to help our learners go out and discover information, and that's a lot about what our navigation pieces are about discovery. And you guys have been using this for a long time. If you've been doing e-learning, this is not a new concept, but what I'm trying to show you is the way that we design our courses on the mobile side can be just as engaging and just as interactive, even if we don't have all the games and things, but now we're making it interactive because there's a need for discovery or a need to know. So developing need to know creates stimulation. The learner is cognitively stimulated and is actively processing and interpreting information. So if you develop that need to know, that need to discover things, ask questions, challenges, etc., they're stimulated. Then they're motivated. The learner is driven to act to meet the need. Need fulfillment becomes priority. It's amazing when you need something, how fast and how quickly you go out to drive to get to that. And then we have investigation. The learner discovers information, method, actions that meet the need. Okay? So in all of our courses, beyond navigation, I think we need to do this anyway. But now we have these devices. That's the cool thing about mobile, is that they afford us something that, yes, we had on the desktop. But now that mobile is truly an extension of who we are as a person, that tool that we carry with us literally all the time, we can jump out on the web to grab a lot of things outside of those courses as well, or external challenges or external exercises. And so keep that in mind as well. So let's go back to that need to know before we really move on. You're trying to develop an environment that builds curiosity and builds the need to discover information. And what we tend to do most of the time is we tend to present things in a linear fashion. We try to get all the content we can, and we spend all that time, and we just take the learner through the course. And that's not necessarily bad, and it's good for reference when it's organized that way. And the example that I'm going to use today is actually presentation development model. And I put this together actually for this presentation. I've taught public speaking for over 10 years now, and so I put this together as a model that we could use for this presentation. Now I get to use it again. And so there are 4 pieces of this, and we tend to stick to that linear model and go through. Okay. Yeah, Andrew brings up a good point. He says, as long as you know what you need to know. Well, actually, sometimes that's true and sometimes it's not. As long as we can show that there's a vacuum and show them a direction, a lot of times they'll figure it out. And we'll talk about that. We can discuss that in a little bit. All right, so this is the model we're going to use. First and foremost, we have the message. And I've bulleted all this very short, so we don't have lots of content to run through. But basically, in the presentation development model, we have our message. What do we want to say? What are our primary points? What's the language, the connotation, the denotation there? And then the tone and feel. How do we want the language to sound? You know, those kinds of things. So we develop our message. And then ideally we would know who our audience was. So who are we talking to? And from that standpoint, what are their primary needs, the attitude, and the place and time in which this information will be presented. For example, in public speaking, we may speak about something differently than we may write about it because the way the audience may hear that. And then construct. How are we going to construct this? And I didn't say write because writing is a piece of construction. How are we going to construct the engagement process? How are we going to construct our outline, our flow, and how are we going to build our arguments? And then finally, delivery. Voice, eye contact, practice, body, all those good things. And why didn't I say speech development model? Because if I say the word speech, many people start to flush, want to run out of the room. But if I say presentation, actually people feel better about it. So these are the 4 pieces that we're going to use in our development model today. Okay. Now, before moving on, does anybody have any questions about that need to know that we were discussing earlier? Or any thoughts there? Okay. So we're looking to build that need to know, and we're looking to build a navigational system that will fit with that. So what we tend to do is it looks something like this on the mobile device. We have a linear model, and I take the message and the audience and the construct and delivery, and I just lay them out as I would suggest that you would go through those. So, and then we just ask the student to go through each one. Okay. Does that tend to build much of a need to know? We're kind of playing follow the leader there, which does have a benefit of relaying information, but does that help the discovery process? So you had a question. You said, is it like the WIFFM? I'm not following the acronym. If you could type that out, I would appreciate it. So that's what we tend to do. We tend to kind of lay everything out in linear form because in e-learning, that's what we tended to do. We kind of lay everything out, and you kind of go through the course from that standpoint. And by the way, these navigational structures work just as well on the desktop as they do in mobile. But in the mobile, oh, what's in it for me? Yeah. Yes, thank you for that clarification. Yes, it's what's in it for me. That's another way of saying, okay, I need this, what's in it for me, exactly. Okay. So we tend to lay everything out, and then we say, okay, go through this. The problem is that the screens tend to look the same. We design the same consistently and those things like that, and so we tend to get lost a bit after a while because things get a little bit monotonous. Well, that's the thing about discovery that actually helps the student remember because they're making decisions to move when they choose to do so. So let me jump over, and I'm actually going to switch my screens now to show the mobile side here. So give me 1 second. And I'm actually going to jump out to Rapid Intake's emulator. And I built a quick menu on the front. I have the table of contents and things, but because we're jumping around, I wanted to show you this. I left it in the horizontal or landscape view so you can see the whole screen. So here we have the message. Okay. Then I would slide through and I'd read about the audience. Then I'd slide through and I'd read about the construct or construct, not construct, how to construct the presentation. And then I'd read through the delivery and I'd think, okay, where was, and I'd go back and I'd keep going through that. Now we only have 4 pieces here, but can you imagine many of our courses have 50 pieces to them, okay? And they're chunked in available chunks and things, but so we have a lot going on there. So at that point, that's what that linear model looks like, and that's how we tend to build things. Okay. So let me introduce our first piece of just interesting ways to navigate here is what I call the quick flip. The cool thing about mobile, if you think about how we navigate on a mobile device, is that we use our finger or fingers. And actually, if you watch children, I watch my kids on the iPad all the time, and if you watch people who are on their tablets and mobile devices all the time, man, they're fast with their hands, and they move through. And so the cool thing is that I was thinking, you know what if I wanted to introduce a model very quickly to get them into it, basically set a schema or schemata there for them, a construct to work within, and then I would get into the details. So one of the things I decided to do is build what I call a quick flip. And let me go back to the course viewer here. So if I click the quick flip, basically I give them some instruction. I say flip through the presentation development model. And I don't really tell them anything else, and I give them an arrow. By the way, I did battle with whether to point the arrow to the right or the left, because you actually flip your finger to the left to go to the right. Okay, so, and that's just like every book, you know, ebook and those kinds of things. But I did sort of that. But what I found out in the research that I did is that actually people will tend to grab the front of the arrow and they'll move this direction. So in a quick flip, what happens is it's just very quick information. Message, what are you saying? Audience, who are you speaking to? How will you write it on the construct side? How will you say it on the delivery side? And it's a very quick introduction to that particular model. But they don't know what's coming next. If I haven't introduced anything, they don't know what the next piece is. So that's where some of that discovery comes into play, and they're flipping through on their own. And then obviously on the last slide, I actually put the whole model up on the screen like I wanted to see. That's the one thing that when I build my courses, just like many of you, I always like to grab them with a little bit of mystery, grab them with a little bit of curiosity, and I put a lot of things in visual form. One of the things you'll notice even about this course is there's lots of visuals versus lots of text. So I try to make them as visual as possible from that standpoint. And I try to use a lot of models. It makes it easier to conceptualize information, okay? And it makes it easier to see on the mobile device without having to read. Now, obviously, there's going to be text that we have to read, but it's very easy to remember message, audience, construct, and delivery if they're in graphical form or button form, if you will. And actually, at mLearning DevCon in the next week or two, Katie Stroud is actually going to she's done some webinars for the conference as well. She talks about how to make things more visual, which is cool. Okay, so how did I build this? Well, let me just show you what that looks like from the standpoint. It's not very hard. It's actually pretty darn easy. This happens to be Rapid Intake's mobile learning development tool. It's really fill-in-the-blank mobile development. But all I did is I built four pages. That's still in here. I built the quick flip pages one by one, okay? And I just dropped in the image for each one. And so it's just done by putting in the title, putting in an image, and I could put text in there if I wanted, dropping in my image, picking my image up from my media manager, and then going to the next one. And all I did is copied and pasted and kept dropping in a new image. And here are my images, and I just kept inserting the next image. So it was very easy. Matter of fact, I'll just let you know that I built this entire course this morning. I wrote the presentation several days ago, and it outlines and all that kind of stuff. But I actually built this course this morning with all the strategy here. So that's it. I just built that quick flip, allowed them to flip through. The one other recommendation I will make there is that on the quick flip, make sure that you're not loading a lot of information on the page, on the mobile page, because you are on a mobile device. And so I would make the graphics smaller in size and not as much detail, those kinds of things. And I would build them for the size for the device you're trying to hit. So, you know, obviously, if you're trying to hit a tablet versus a phone or all three, you've got to find that good middle-size image size that'll work for you. But that quick flip is pretty nice, and I've gotten to where I like to use that. Okay. Any questions there? How is quick flip helping us with 50-slide content? Well, no. Quick flip is a small piece. The question is how does the quick flip help us with 50 slides? It's not for 50 slides. Quick flip as a navigational structure is there to introduce a concept very quickly, but allow the user to discover it as they go along. Okay, so you might have a quick flip that's 6, 7, 8 slides, and they're pushing through it, and remember, they're engaged because they're interactive. They're looking at the next slide. They're driving at that point. We put them in the driver's seat, and that's it. Okay, that's a good question, though. This is not for every screen. This is to introduce topics, to review topics, those kinds of things, like flashcards, if you want to think of it that way. So in your instructional design, you might put some flashcards at the beginning, some flashcards at the end, and because if we put it at the beginning, the quick flip or the flashcards work as a cognitive structure. If we put them at the end, they work as review. Okay. All right, so let's go back. Any other questions about the quick flip there? So again, we're getting out of the mode. This is still linear, but there's some curiosity because they don't know necessarily what's coming next. Okay. Okay. All right. I'm just checking questions here. Okay. So now let's go ahead and move on to now decision thumbs. Now this is really just a menu. Okay. But let me ask you a question here. In this particular process, or in most processes, does it matter if they begin at the beginning? Does it matter if they begin with message or not? Does anybody have any thoughts on that? Paul, you say no. How come? Does it matter? In most of our processes and procedures that we're trying to teach, does it matter if they start at the beginning? Gary says depends on the content. Okay. So a lot of you are saying it depends. Okay. If they want to jump, but let me tell you something about this. Is where that need to know we come back to that need to know. Let's say, for example, they jump to audience. They see the message, they think they know the message, and they jump to audience. Okay. And they begin looking at that. Matter of fact, let me bring it up in the course view so you can see it here. So they jump to audience, and they begin working on their audience analysis and breaking down what the audience needs. Okay. And then they go, well, I don't know my audience primary needs because I'm not sure what the message is. Oh, okay. I need to go back, and I need to go back and review my message component. Okay. They're reading the message, right, and going through. And what happens at each time that they do something like this, they actually say, okay, oh, I don't know something else. So they go back, and they have to look at other things. Okay. And in the end, because the way we've designed the model, that they'll end up looking at all four because each plays a specific role. Okay. Now, what's interesting about this is that, granted, if you do software training, okay, and you've got 57 steps, I mean, it's amazing how many steps, and by the way, I've done a lot of software e-learning and things, and there are 57 steps, okay? So the interesting thing is that you may not want to mix up their steps, right? But every software application when we're doing training can be broken up into small subsets of procedures, okay? And if that's the case, and they can jump around and look at different subsets of procedures, okay, from that standpoint, and still realize what they don't know and they have to go figure out and those kinds of things. But really what this does is it puts the learner in the driver's seat of what they think's important. But in the end, because there's a need, they're going to figure out that they don't know enough to complete the cycle. Okay. Now, you could put some checks and balances on that. You know, if they do audience and they come out and then all of a sudden you go, hey, you haven't looked at message yet. You probably ought to go back. Sure, you can do those kinds of things. But it doesn't necessarily matter if they start at the beginning. Okay. Not all the time, anyway. Let me just see. There were lots of comments here, so let me just kind of review. there is a comment that says, yes, you need to tell them in order so they can focus on the content. And that comment is yes, you need to tell them first the order it needs to go in. That is building that cognitive structure that we talked about in the beginning. Okay, so maybe you would do the quick flip first just to give them the basic concepts, but then when we get into the actual detail of the content, does it really matter the order in which they perceive it or which they receive it? Not necessarily, because you've given them that construct up front. The other thing I'll mention, since that comment came up, is that you can mix these navigational strategies around. This is not a navigational strategy for the entire course, right? You do something, you do a quick flip maybe at the beginning, then you do a thumb menu, and we're going to talk about scenarios in a minute, and then you do an exercise, and then maybe you do another quick flip. You mix and match these, because the other part of engagement, as you all know, is that we have to keep the learner thinking and changing gears a little bit, because if we don't, what happens? Attention span wanes, and we lose them because it all sounds the same and looks the same. Okay, so a lot of times, many of us on the e-learning side with Flash and things, we would go back and we would build an exercise or find something to build an exercise, and we put an exercise in it to do that. So we would do our linear course, they would follow through, they would do an exercise, get their attention back up to speed, and then they would go back doing the linear exercise again. Well, it's more difficult in the mobile world right now, as of today, to build exercises without knowing, because all the development tools haven't evolved for the mobile side. They're coming. Matter of fact, for example, Sencha Animator has the ability to do animation and interactivity, but you have to learn Sencha Animator. It's Flash-like animations and interactivity. Actually, I'll be teaching a webinar on that in a couple of weeks, maybe a month. But those things are coming, but as of right now, that's why the navigation piece, because if you can keep them engaged with navigation and discovery there, then if you don't have an exercise, you're not necessarily going to lose them in the process, if that makes sense. Let's see. I'm just looking at questions here. Somebody says, mobile is just a great just-in-time tool. Sometimes the learner will want to jump straight into the content they desire. Absolutely. And that is the thing about mobile, is that not only are we teaching them for the first time, but it is a great reference device or reference tool as well. And we have to keep that in mind as we do things from that standpoint. And a lot of times it may be just the way we stack the content and put it together. Okay, so that is that's the decision thumbs from that standpoint. So they can see the different things that they have the options to jump into. Okay. The cool thing about this is that if you put it in there that way, then you have the ability to add to this menu as you go along. So let's say, for example, they're jumping around to different content pieces in different places where you can keep adding to this menu, keep jumping in your course. By the way, you can do this in PowerPoint too, not for the mobile device, but you can do the same kind of thing as far as links and stuff from that standpoint. Now, the one thing I did want to show you, I'm going to go back to the development tool for a second. The thumb menus, one of the cool things that I need to mention is that we actually have released an custom HTML5 editor in the Rapid Intake toolset, which allows me to build those thumb menus very easily. And there's actually two ways to build the menu. One, you can put in the HTML, and these are pulling from my Media Manager, just like the course did from that standpoint. And so that Media Manager allows you to upload all your graphics and all your videos and things, and you can work collaboratively on the same mobile course, which is great. But this allows me to actually construct that page through HTML, through an HTML editor here from that standpoint. I'm actually thinking about probably November, towards the end of the year, teaching some mobile HTML to get people into that custom HTML area, because we wrap it, we'll put our course around it, but then you can build the content on the page pretty much however you'd like. And this is how I built that menu in that custom. For those of you that are HTML savvy, here's the HTML that I put together for that standpoint. The other thing I'll mention while we're here, and I'm not going to go through this today, but I do want to mention that we do have the ability to upload HTML packages, which JavaScript and CSS and those kinds of things. So you can build even more complex menus and structures with something that you build and upload. Okay. So that's a great thing, and that custom HTML5 actually is in testing right now and should roll out here in the fall. So we're looking forward to that. It's one of my favorite things about our tool is literally you can build the page however you like, and you don't have to worry about the construct of the mobile course itself. Okay, so let's jump back to our presentation here. Not that one, this one. And let's talk about scenarios. There's a lot of comments about scenarios in recent times. Over the last year and a half, everybody wants to do scenarios. But basically, I call them choose your own adventures, allowing the user to make decisions. Well, in the mobile world, we're just talking about a website, so we're linking the pages. So when you're building a mobile scenario, you have to build all of the outcomes, okay? So if I'm the guy in the forest in my choose your own adventure, you have to build the safe way out, you have to build the bear pit, you have to build the alligator pit, and you have to build, you know, the scenario where I find the pot of gold. And you have to build all of them, and then basically you just build in links to ask questions of where they should go when. When I used to do this, with the 3 little pigs, and I'd say, okay, which house should you go to? And it's that decision process. So I really like scenarios, and it does take time to build all that because you have to build all your outcomes, all your decisions, and then you have to build the links and all that stuff to make that work. Okay? The cool thing in the tool that I'm using is that I can actually see all my outcomes in my tree here. So I know all the pages and all my outcomes and those kinds of things, so I can see it all right there in front of me. Okay. So on the scenario thumbs, basically all that means is that now I'm going to give them a scenario, I'm going to ask them a question, or give them a task, and then they have to go discover from that standpoint. Okay. Oops, not quite done yet. So I'm going to go back here to my course viewer, and I'm just going to click back to the menu here. I go to thumbs. So in this case, and it looks really small on the screen, I need to adjust the font there. But basically what it says is the presentation development scenario. It says directions. You are to present a new product with its features. Sorry, gang. You are to present a new product with its features and functions to a new vertical. Okay. Use the presentation development model to create your presentation. Okay. So basically in that scenario I said you've got new product, so you've got new messaging. Okay. It's a new vertical, so you have a new audience. And then of course they're going to have to construct the presentation and they're going to have to deliver that presentation. And I basically leave them at that. And then I give them the 4 pieces, and then they have to go through and discover. So if they click message, for example, the difference is in the scenario, I ask them what's next. So I've read message, for example, I've constructed my message, I constructed what I want to say, I found my features and benefits that I'd like to talk about, but then I give them other options, right? Would you do this next? Would you do that next? Whatever that may be. And somebody earlier was talking about, well, if you just give them thumbs, you know, they may not have a construct for what's going on. With a scenario, you can lead them through, but you're not just telling them to go through it, you're guiding them through. So it's a coaching process versus just, here, let me take you through it. And so it has a little different feel. It goes back to that need to know from a coaching standpoint, which is cool. So here I can jump to audience, for example, or I can go back to the menu if I choose to do so. And I can follow through from that standpoint. Okay. So let's take a step back for a second and let's think about some of your mobile courses. And I don't really have a slide for this, forgive me. I was just thinking about this, that if I was going to look at a structure to build from that standpoint, I have, I might start with an introduction, and then I might start with a quick flip to introduce something. And then I might take them through a scenario. And the great thing about scenarios is it really shows them what they don't know. Okay. So I might take them through a scenario. Then I might take them through a linear structure, just kind of talking through the information. Then I might go back and do another scenario to see how they did, or just do a discovery exercise at that point. But I keep changing what the learner needs to do, and it's all really through navigation. It's the same information that I'm trying to teach, but I'm asking the user to navigate to that or make decisions in different ways each time. Okay, and that's really where the engagement comes from on the need to know side. Okay. Any comments or thoughts there? Let's see. Do you think learners learn and retain more using the discovery method? Absolutely. Matter of fact, we're trained now to go discover information. All of you are professionals doing the things that we do every day, and when you need to learn something new, where do you go? Do you reach for a book on your desk? Google. Yeah. My students used to make fun of me all the time because I'd say Google it. And it's funny because, no, not everything exists on the web, but you see trains of thoughts and things to go, and we've gotten used to that discovery method. That's the thing, is we've gotten used to being able to jump around and find things. And yes, if we don't know what we need, we may miss things sometimes, and it's good to get that big picture. Absolutely. But we are used to the discovery side, and what happens is because we are driving and meeting that need to know, then what happens is that information tends to be retained. One of my favorite things to do as a teacher is I always ask questions to the students with answers they don't know. For example, if I were to start this presentation today, I might have a slide that just says, what are the 4 stages of the presentation development model? And all the kids would look down, or all you guys would look down, and you'd say, don't look at me, Mr. Bickle. And then you'd start thinking about it and brainstorming on it. But the key is that I've asked you a question, and it actually creates anxiety. You don't know the answer, so you're afraid I'm going to call you on it. And what happens, as soon as I build that anxiety, as soon as I show you the answer or let you discover the answer, there's relief, and that vacuum is filled at that point. So just a thing that I like to do. Thank you for that. Just a nice compliment there. So, okay. So the last thing I want to talk about is that in the e-learning world, before we went mobile and things like that, we had a tendency to try to put everything that we wanted the student to do in the course. Okay. But the issue becomes is that, one, it's hard to maintain all that. There's a lot of material. It takes a lot of time to develop that. So one of the things I've been talking more and more about is actually external challenges or external resources. Now, a lot of us have done resources where we put links in our courses to things that they can go get. And that's exactly what I did on the mobile side, is I went here, I put other resources, things that they can go look for and find and those kinds of things, okay? And I put that out there. But the thing that I've noticed when I've built some courses and we did some focus group testing and those kinds of things is that if you ask somebody to write 3 things down on a piece of paper, usually they'll sit down and they'll write 3 things on a piece of paper. If you ask them to go to a website and find something, they'll go out and find something. And that's kind of the cool thing about being on a mobile device, is that you can jump from your course directly out to a website and look up information and then come back to the course again. Okay, so if your course asks a question, makes a challenge, it builds that need to know because the information's not actually in the course. They have to go out and find it. And that's a valuable piece too, okay? And anytime we ask questions, it develops that discovery habit once again. So that's the thought process there on the external piece, from an external standpoint, going out and getting them out of the mobile course and doing things. And if you think about it, on the mobile side, that's particularly useful because how much time do we spend at any one time looking at our device? Does anybody have a guess on the average? Nobody has any guesses. Wake up. Do seconds and minutes. How long do we tend to look at our mobile devices at any one time? Yeah, so if we're checking messaging, it's anywhere from 5 to 20 seconds. If we're checking social stuff, it's anywhere from 30 seconds to a minute. And if we're looking at content or looking something up, it's usually anywhere from 30 seconds to a minute, minute and a half. Okay. So we want to get in there pretty quickly and be able to find things as quickly as we can. Now, does that mean you can't put a full course out there for people? No, that does not mean that. It just means your navigational structure and how you get them into that course is even more important, and you need to drive that ability for them to find the content that they need very quickly. Okay? If somebody is looking for information, for example, you don't want to make them do a quick flip at the beginning. You want them to be able to skip over that, because a quick flip is labor intensive. That's a teaching tool, whereas a menu is a jumping tool or a tool to help them find information. Okay. All right. So again, I was using rapid intake tools here to build my mobile course. Okay. And I was looking at it in our emulator, which I can rotate and see different things here, okay, which is cool. So with that being said, are there any other thoughts? I like to open up. We got about 15 minutes, which is great. I like to open it up for questions. Are there any questions or thoughts, or hey, can we do this or can we do that? Those kinds of things. Where do the statistics of how long they come from? Just various things I've read, right? Just, I couldn't say, honestly. That's a bad speech person in me. I need to record all those for you guys. I'll see if I can find them, Brittany. Those are just things I've read over the last few weeks. But I will take a look. Because the articles were depending on the activity that they were doing, so they were coming from different places. But I'll see if I can go back and find them. Thanks for the question. Somebody says, I have to develop a co-manual and other online versions of navigation. I can see how the translator some of this, but do you have any warnings? I have to develop a manual and online versions. Oh, I see what you're saying. So you have to build a manual and online versions. Well, a manual, the online version you can use as in the mobile version you're using as a teaching tool. So you're actually using the device as a facilitation tool. Where a manual, how is the manual going to be used? Is it a reference manual? That's the biggest question there. So come back with that. I'm a novice. Is this for small nugget training? Actually, Liz, it could be for anything. You can mix and match your navigational model throughout your course, just depending on what you like to do. Basically, what I'm doing is I'm using the navigation as a way to interact with the learner, interact with the course, and make decisions. So you can change it throughout as you go along. Okay. If you browse away from a course to look up information, how do I get back to the right page in the course? Well, that's the cool thing. If it's a browser course in a mobile device, not an app, and it should be on the app the same way. But if it's a browser course, the way the browser windows work, and in most of the devices that I've seen, you can open a new window. When you come back, you're at the same place you left off on the same page. So you shouldn't have that issue. Start at the beginning. This is such an intriguing concept. Thinking in this discovery mode means you have to kick your game up a notch, whether you're a designer or a trainer. Yeah, you do have to think in a bigger term from a discovery side. And guys, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that linear mode is wrong. I'm just saying it's not as engaging at times. So there are going to be times that we want to walk them through content screen by screen, and that's perfectly fine. The key is that you want to mix up your navigation so you're changing modes a bit, so they're having to think and change and help their attention. That and attention and retention at that standpoint. So it's a mix of all these. So this is not an all or nothing piece. You got to mix them up. Any other? Let's see. She says no. The manual version will be at the workshop. The online will have to be standalone. Okay. So the question is, if the workshop has an instructor, well, obviously the manual has to fit with the instructor. The online version can be different because it's a standalone piece. So yes, it will have some of this. It will have a lot of the same information, but the way it's structured can be different. And I would advise it actually to be. Yes, it's a little more work because you can't, just follow the book and create everything. Yes, but I think you'll find that your mobile course will be more engaging from that standpoint, because in the classroom or the workshop, the instructor is the engagement factor. Okay. Let's see. I've already planned a nonlinear presentation at the workshop because I have people with different needs. Then the online will have to stand in for me presenting. Oh, I see. Yes. I mean, now the one thing I haven't mentioned much today, by the way, on these thumbs, is that video is very, very useful on the mobile devices. And forgive me for not bringing that up till now. It's very easy to put video on mobile. Matter of fact, we upload the video to our tool, and it already converts it to MP4 and does that automatically. And so it's very easy to do. And so instead of clicking these screens and jumping to a text and image screen, you would click these screens and jump to a video, which would be very useful. And Monette, I think it's Monette, you might think about that, because the things that we can do on mobile very, very well are text, images, video, and audio. And video is very, very important. And the cool thing is that YouTube has actually done a wonderful thing for us trainers. We used to think that video had to be perfect and booths and sound rooms and perfect cameras and all that kind of stuff, but YouTube has taught everybody that they can learn from really low quality video. And so I don't mean put out low quality video, but you can learn. And so for less, about anywhere from $700 to $1,000, you can start producing your own videos very, very easily from that standpoint. And then you can use, instead of jumping to a text page or an image page, you can jump to a video page from that standpoint. And what that looks like here is, if I just add a page, I can actually, for us anyway, you can actually put text and video or just a video, and then I just go grab my video that I want to show on the page. So I put in a title, and then I can put in, I just go grab my video from my media library, and I just insert that, and it gives me a preview here. And so now I have a page with video, and then literally I can jump to that page from that standpoint. So I'll just show you that video page that I created real quick. It's still saving that piece. I'll show you in a second. Okay. If not on the internet, let's see. How can I do it? In Rapid Intake, do you recommend designing mobile versus desktop in order to do what you're talking about? Well, you can actually design in both, but because you can design the desktop side and the mobile side at the same time. But I mean, this goes for e-learning as well. I mean, we're talking about mobile today, but the navigational structures that we're talking about go for mobile as well. The one thing is, on the desktop side, in the Rapid Intake, we don't have a custom HTML component like we do on the mobile side from that standpoint. But our mobile courses will view on the desktop as well, so you can do that. Where can I download the software? It's actually a cloud software. It's online at rapidintake.com. You can go take a look, and there's a trial out there from that standpoint. But it is online collaborative authoring software, which means more than one of your team members can be in the same application working at the same time, all using the same media manager, etc. It says, if not on the internet, you want somebody to see a YouTube, is it possible to download the YouTube ahead of time? Unfortunately, YouTube is actually designed to not do that. It's actually designed so you can't take the video. But what you can do is, obviously, you can link to that, and with custom HTML, you can actually embed it in the page. But yeah, if it's stored on YouTube, you're going to have to find a way to either re-record the video, which is, depending on rights and copyrights and those kinds of things, could be interesting. You need to get permission for that, and actually get the video and put it in your course from that standpoint. If those of you that are interested in offline content that on tablets or devices and they're off the internet, we have a method called in-learning sync that allows you to push those courses out to the device, manage the course, and actually it'll sync SCORM and those kinds of things back when you get back online from that standpoint. So if you're interested, visit rapidintake.com or email me for that. The additional engagement factor, read questions here. The additional engagement factor, having students contribute content, pictures from their discovery or writing. Yeah, absolutely. If you know if you put out content, if you can work out a method to upload or to push content back, absolutely. That's very, very helpful. Not only that, you can see what your students are getting and what they're pushing back to you. Can educational institutions adopt Rapid as their learning management system? Well, let's just make sure we're clear. We have our authoring side, which is Rapid Intake tool and the collaborative authoring, and then learning management, as far as users and registration and achievements and all those kinds of things. We do that for the Litmus side, which is part of the Calidus cloud piece, but Litmus is our LMS from that standpoint. I will say that in-learning sync has the tracking capabilities from that as well, but it's really two sides of the same coin. We've got our authoring environment, and then we have Litmus, which is our LMS environment, which is a cloud-based LMS as well. So if you have questions on that, you can contact me directly, and I can get you in touch with our team, or I can work with you on that as well. All right. Any other questions about navigation or anything else? Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's been my pleasure today on Friday to talk to you and go through this with you. Just as a quick review, don't forget to switch up your navigational strategies, okay? And then that way you can do a linear model and then maybe switch to a quick flip and then go to a decision thumb and then maybe build a scenario or two. Don't forget that you can use videos. If you have questions on how to use video or you want to get into doing that, let me know. We can talk about that as well. The last thing I'll show you today is I do have a blog which is off the Rapid Intake site, and you can submit comments or questions there as well, okay? And I'll be happy to help you work out your issues and what you're trying to do. It says, we're trying to build mobile learning strategy. Do you folks have any white papers or info on this? I'll have to go back and look, Suzanne, if we do or not. Strategy is one of those things that we really look at from organization to organization. So, for example, I'll be in Minneapolis in a couple of weeks talking about strategy and those kind of things. But if that's a conversation you want to have, we can talk about strategy and pass some notes back and forth on that. So, yeah, if we want to talk, we can. And I'm sure we do have materials, but it really is on a case-by-case basis, depending on who needs what. All right, folks. Well, that's my time for today. We're just about there at the end. I really appreciate it. Again, I will provide the recording. It will be up on rapidintake.com, and I'll provide some resources, the slides, and those kinds of things as well. But again, remember, mix up your navigational strategies, build that need to know, that need to discover things, and I think you'll find that you'll have a lot of engagement in your mobile courses. I appreciate you guys very much. You guys have a wonderful Friday, a wonderful weekend, and we'll talk to you soon.